You all. Welcome you all to the ADVAN Chief Marketing Officer and Communications Forum. Appreciate every one of you for making our time, and I'm blocking your calendar to join us for today. Just before we go, the team is projecting the agenda for the day. I would like by introducing the ESCO for ADVAN, and of course I will start from Ms. Bumi Adeniba, who is the acting president of ADVAN, and Mrs. Bridget Onyefeso Odunsami, who is the first vice president. We also have Mrs. Ediri Osale, who is the executive secretary for the association. We also have Ms. Bukola Bankole, who is in charge of our publicity. And also in that line, we'll have Ms. Gloria Nwabike, who is an ex-official. We equally have Mr. Ehis Omokare, who is also part of the ESCO and our ex-official. And in that line, we also have Mr. Gerard Osugo, who is an ex-official for ADVAN. And so I would like that we take 1 minute from the ESCO to say hi to the entire team and people that is in this session. So Ms. Bumi, can you say hi to the house?
Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Emmanuel, Chris, Manogre. Thank you to all our panelists here and to John as well.
Okay. All right. Ms. Bridget Onyefeso.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're really glad that you made it, and we look forward to a very insightful session. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. And Ediri, please, can you greet the house?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. Thank you for being here. I wish you all all of us a very productive session. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll have Ms. Bankole, who is our publicity secretary.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining, and I wish everybody a fruitful session.
Okay, and then Gloria, please, can you say hi to the house this morning?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be in this session today. Thank you all for attending. We look forward to a very exciting and productive session today.
Okay, and then we'll move straight to Gloria, Gerard, and of course, Gerard and Ahis.
Good morning, all. Thank you all for joining this webinar. It promises to be quite insightful and exciting. So stay tuned.
Okay, Ahis.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is Ahis. It's exciting to have everybody here. I'm looking forward to the great session. Thank you for joining.
All right, thank you. And those are just words from the ADVAN ESCO. And so I move straight to introduce the panelists and the speakers for today. And please permit me to start with Mr. Chris Wolf-Caesar, who is the marketing director of Friesland Campina. Chris, please, when I call each of the speakers and panelists, I would appreciate if you can just say hi to the house.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing good. Looking forward to an exciting conversation about VUCA. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then we'll go straight to Mr. John Broom, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Australia Advertising Association.
Good morning, everyone. Very pleased and indeed very honoured to be with you this morning. And I hope, and I'm sure it's going to be a very, very interesting session. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then straight we'll go to Ms. Ife Dozier, who is the Marketing Director of Sub-Saharan Africa for MasterCard.
Good morning, everyone. Indeed, it's an honor and a privilege to be amongst all the panelists today to discuss a very important topic in these troubling times that we're living in. So look forward to the insights and the conversations and the questions. Thank you.
Okay. And also introducing Mr. Emmanuel Ago, who is the Marketing Director for Jotna Group, the Lakasara company.
Good morning, everyone. Good to be here. And I wish we're all keeping safe. And let's have an interesting session today.
All right, thank you, Emma. And then we also have Ms. Bridget Onyefeso Odunsami as also part of our panelists. And again, we'll have Bridget say good morning and say hi to the house.
Good morning again, and hi, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Straight we go to Mr. Agre Maposa, who is the Chief Growth Officer for Canada, West, East, and Central Africa. Agre, please, can you say good morning to the house?
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion, a very important discussion in these very troubling trying times that we are in. Thank you. All right.
Thank you. And so at this point, we'll go straight to have Ms. Bumi Adeniba, who is the acting president of ADVAN, for her word to the webinar before we go straight into the full session.
All right. Okay, so I would first just two simple things that I want to do. The important thing is to welcome us, but more importantly, I'm mindful that we're running a bit late to get started. We apologize for that. So the interest of course correcting our time, this is not going to be a very long speech for me because the conversation ahead of us, marketing in the VUCA environment, is quite instructive enough and topical at this point in time. And we bring in the experts. So in the interest of that, I'm just going to say, let's have a full deliberation, drop your questions and comments. Leave the experts to just help us to navigate this conversation. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Bumi, for such a very short speech. And I think Bumi has just hit the point directly. We all know the whole business landscape has become extremely competitive. We're quite in a very pivotal point as marketeers, especially for Nigeria, where a market that have been high yielding, high profit has become extremely competitive. We, as marketeers, are living in such a precarious time, right? Because businesses and landscape are getting redrawn. Landscapes are getting shifted right under our feet. And how do we stay relevant? How do we stay as a body of marketeers, a community of marketeers, ensure that we deliver relevance and growth to the business we operate? And of course, the COVID pandemic has made it more big a question for us as marketeers to answer that question daily. So that has precipitated the conversation. I'm going to go straight to our first keynote speaker for the day to have his thoughts and to start the conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name's John Broom. As I said before, I'm very, very honoured to be with you today. I'm sitting in a very cold room in Sydney, Australia. It's actually our winter. And this morning, very unusual for Australia, I woke up to a ground frost. So just to show that it's a very different world than what I was expecting. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. And this is the moment when all panelists, you know, hold their heart in their mouth to make sure that the tech actually works. So I'm hoping that you can now see that. If somebody could just wave to me just to say that, yep, great, thank you very much, that you can see it. And I'm now going to go to full screen and hopefully this will work. Yeah, there we go. Look, I actually want to start off with a key message that we're all marketers on this call. Within all our businesses, no matter what shape or size or category or industry that we deal with, it's incumbent on us to turn adversity into opportunity. Simply put, no other profession is closer to the customer or the consumer. And in times of great adversity and change, particularly when consumer behavior and consumer sentiment is changing, the rest of the business, be they the finance people, the production people, the CEO, or whoever, should be turning to the marketer to be able to say, what do we do now? So by way of introduction, I actually don't call myself a CEO of an advertiser association. My DNA is brand marketing. Like a lot of you guys, my entire career has been spent in marketing, primarily with FMCG companies. On the screen now you can see a few that I've worked for. I've kind of like sized these in context of the influence on my thinking, on my marketing career. So I spent the longest time with Reckitt Benckiser. They were very defining for me in terms of how I approach business and commercial issues through marketing. But also Kellogg's and Nestle, very influential. And I also spent a short period of time at Unilever here in Australia too. So, my DNA is brand marketing, and I look at any commercial problem through brands. And I think that's my first message to you. You're all, in command, in control, custodians of brands, many of which will be, I'm sure, quite old brands. And in some ways, we have a short responsibility in our careers, because typically we pick up a brand from somebody else, we look after it for a few years. Hopefully, by the end of the time when we pass it on to somebody else, we leave it in a much more healthy state. And I think the tenure that we've all now got on our respective brands is in a set of circumstances that are obviously unprecedented. So it really does call for very, very different thinking. And that's the theme I'd like to share with you as I go through my section this morning. So what's important right now? And look, I'm not going to get into conversations as to whether it's a V-shaped recovery, a U-shaped recovery, when is there going to be a vaccine? Is that going to change everything? Because all those things are, relatively speaking, unknown and unknowable. We can't control those. So it's, relatively speaking, pointless in talking about them. I think we actually have to go back to some more fundamental issues. And that is really about asking the right questions in the first place about our business relative to our customers or consumers. Because the answer will be different for each of us, of course. Some categories may be facing situations where actually the consumer involvement with or engagement with your business hasn't changed much at all. Others may have actually seen something completely change overnight. So that's a very, very different question to solve for. But it's very, very important to actually identify what that critical problem of yours is, and then focus in on solving that. This may all sound very, very motherhood, but believe me, the number of my members who are chasing after questions or problems which they've got no real chance of solving, because they are, in the grand scheme of things, to the customers, for example, their brand might be irrelevant, and hence, the amount of time they're thinking about that is inconsequential. So it's really, really important to narrow in on asking the right questions. The other thing, of course, to remember is a lot of the assumptions that we've all based our plans and ideas, our visions, our growth strategies, our executional plans or whatever, of course, could have changed. And it's very much a case that we have to go back to basics and check out each of those assumptions. Are they still true, or have they changed? I think the third and final aspect that's important is we need to drive confidence that a brighter future is real, because ultimately the marketing profession is accountable for being the lighthouse for their business. We can, metaphorically speaking, or should be able to see over the horizon. What is the consumer thinking today? Why are they thinking that? What insights does that generate? How do I, then turn those insights into commercial ideas and opportunities for growth? Bringing that type of conversation to the leadership room and being able to actually articulate in appropriate storytelling what a brighter future looks like, and very, very importantly, how to get there, is the job of the Chief Marketing Officer. It doesn't matter what we call ourselves, and I can wax lyrical about this. Chief Growth Officer, Chief Experience Officer, Chief Customer Officer, it's all rubbish. At the end of the day, we are marketers at heart, and we are Chief Marketing Officers, and that's our role in the leadership room. In terms of the context of the VUCA world, I thought that it'd be best to try and explain in the short amount of time that I've got 5 things that matter right now. And I've drawn, obviously, these 5 things from a lot of what I see here in my market, but I'm sure that many of them are consistent with your market as well. And I'm sure we can talk about some of them in more depth in the panel section at the end of the presentations. Where I'd like to start is around, believe it or not, capabilities. Interestingly, Australia, as you may or may not be aware, has had 29 years of no recession. We haven't had a recession in Australia since the early 90s. We've got a whole generation or 2 of marketers who have never experienced an economic downturn. So whereas you might have marketers who've got the fundamental skills, have they actually been asked to use those skills in the economic circumstances that we're now facing? That's point number 1. Point number 2 is that we hear a lot about the hard technical skills that we as marketers need right now, particularly around digital skills, data science, driving insights and ideas from data sources increasingly now driven by technology and MarTech. And I think a lot of the solutions that we see around capability are focused, perhaps too focused, on that area. Where a lot of my members have reached out to the AANA is, John, in order to equip my teams to be able to cope with these unprecedented times, we need to lean into softer skills, what we call higher order human skills, skills to be able to lead change around our brands and our marketing. And an example of what we've done here with the AANAs is that we've responded to that and completely pivoted our capability program. And this is just an example of the type of areas that we're now teaching marketers in Australia. So we've kind of like said, okay, what are those soft skills that people need right now? And we've identified resilience, skills around curiosity, how to think about problem solving creatively, how to actually think about innovation, and this is not just literally new products or new services, how to think innovatively to drive new growth opportunities. But then very, very importantly, once you've got a new plan, how do you actually bring all that together and inspire the organization and win support with that within the leadership room? And that's where strategic storytelling comes in. And believe it or not, it's not all about rational argument and numbers and figures. It's actually about the emotive story as much as anything. Giving people the confidence that there is a brighter future, and that by executing this plan against a right strategy, against some great new insights, that success, growth, whatever the metric is achievable. So that's just the first one. The second one is really, of course, we've seen the rise of online, and we've recently done some research in Australia here around what's going on here. And I'd sum it up by saying we're seeing an accelerated shift to e-commerce, as obviously people are reluctant to go out or are in forced lockdowns. So businesses, marketers really need to think about how do you actually deliver your products and services through the online channel, but also the distribution channels that go with it, particularly if you're using third parties. And with increasing spend going to online, how do we deliver mass personalization? Obviously, traditional channels like TV are great at mass marketing, but online gives us the additional flexibility through addressability and targeting to deliver more personalized messages. But it has to be on a scale basis, because if you don't, then you're never going to get the commercial outcomes that you're looking for. Thirdly, first-party data will be king. I think we've all heard of the death of cookies. Apple are going to be changing their identifier system on the iPhone, on the iOS system. Basically, our reliance on third-party data, as delivered primarily through cookies today, is going to disappear within 18 months. So I think nothing like a crisis to stimulate change. I think businesses need to get into the space of gathering their first-party data now, owning their customer quite literally. This will be supported by the continued growth of connected TV. I'm not sure what the stats are for you guys, but in Australia now, more than 55% of homes have a smart TV. Addressability is becoming an option for reaching TV audiences. We all know that the large screen is the most effective screen through attention. So therefore, if anything, this is a rebirth of TV, which is great news, because it gives, everyone's been crying about the death of TV. Well, guess what? It's like the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's back and it's here to stay. Fourth, there's no getting away from the fact that, despite pandemic, despite depressions, recessions, or whatever, the old truth that great ideas and great creative drive growth doesn't go away. Believe it or not, and as you're most probably aware from Binet and Field work, having a really great creative execution doubles the ROI of your media. One of the problems we have as a marketing profession, and when we look at the complexity of our choices in the marketing mix, is that we compare the ROI of one channel versus the other, assuming that all creative is constant in delivery. It's not. There's great creative, there's rubbish creative. And as you know, great creative doubles your media ROI. So lean in on this, to engage. And if ever there's a time to break rules, this is it. Break rules, break the paradigms, challenge the assumptions, and just start with a blank piece of paper and build again. And then finally, I think we have to take a long-term view. As much as we're under pressure, particularly from the CFO, for I need results this month. The science, the empirical evidence around the long and short of things is not going to change. Short-term focus will just do this all the time. It will never do that over time. And the important thing is that we have to get that balance right. So, the investment split, should be 60% long-term focused brand building, 40%, performance marketing, short-term sales focused. As soon as you start seeing that swing the other way, you start to see your growth trajectory and your brand health metrics start to wane away. That won't change going through a recession that we're now facing. And of course, by definition, that means we have to have a multi-year vision. So it's not just about going to the board or the leadership group and saying, this is what we're going to do this week or this month. By all means, talk about this week, next week, this month, but then say, this is part of a broader plan for this financial year, which is part of our 3-year or 5-year strategy for the business. So that we can all join the dots towards a long-term future. So I think I've used up my 15 minutes. Hopefully I've kept close to time, but I'm very happy to take questions in the panel section to follow. I'll hand over back to you now.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you for opening our thoughts with that. Quite some very great insights from you. I mean, you raised the question: are we asking the right business questions? Are we solving business problems? And as marketeers, why we operate in such a VUCA environment? There needs to say we have to stay relevant, we have to stay creatively purposeful, and of course, we have to be solving the problems that the business needs. And of course, are we being pathfinders, to find business opportunities, just so we can always remain relevant and contribute daily to our business operations. And so those are the early thoughts from John. And without much ado, we'll go straight to our second speaker, who is Mr. Cruz with Caesar, the Marketing Director for Friesland Campaigner. Chris, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and it's a real honor to be here. Okay, I've got my slides on the screen. If I can just move into slideshow. And thank you, John, for a very interesting perspective and opener. I'd like to be in an environment that hasn't seen inflation in 29 years. It's actually very exciting to be in a place like that. I guess the term VUCA would be very new to many Australians from what I hear from you. Can you move on to my next slide, please? Which is really just what this is about. I remember my first encounter with VUCA. It was long before I moved to Nigeria. You know, countries in Africa, many countries in Africa were termed VUCA countries. Because everything was so unpredictable that it was difficult to have a long-term strategy for the businesses that were trying to operate there. I'm not here to take everyone through the definition of VUCA. I think everybody probably on this call totally understands that already. I'm also not going to spend a bit of time on too much introduction of myself. I currently work for Friesland Campaigner WAMCO, but I've had experiences that last the last 20-something plus odd years. I don't want you guys to guess my age, even though my gray hairs on my face may give me away. But I've been operating in Africa for quite a while, and currently plying my trade with Friesland Campaigner WAMCO. So if we move on to the next slide, I think we all recognize this thing on the screen, right? I think we all do. This is what I call the epitome of VUCA. This is what has put everyone on the same level, that we can have John all the way in Sydney, Australia, talking to us about a topic which probably a couple of years ago may have been a bit difficult to have a conversation across the globe. But this is the epitome of VUCA. This is where the coronavirus has made all of us, has actually made the whole world into a place where it's volatile, it's complex, it's uncertain, and it's definitely not predictable. If you move on to my next slide, next slide. I think when it hit, I think you all would recall that in Nigeria we had a lockdown, and then in recent times we've had an ease of lockdown. Just take a look at the headlines you're seeing. Okay, I think we moved a little bit too fast. Yeah, and look at the headlines you're seeing. I mean, this is a bit of unpredictability. Even during lockdown and even at ease of lockdown, we're still unsure whether we want to reopen school or reopen worship centers. Everything is being rendered into a state of uncertainty. And I think it's not just us, but everywhere in the world. The next slide is really my favorite slide that I've used a couple of times to describe how we find ourselves in these current times. Next slide, please. Now, how many of you recognize the gentleman in the picture? I think we all do. The man in the glasses is called Dr. Fauci. He's the big guy who looks after diseases in the world. He's the main go-to person. He's the guru. Now, the guy next to him is supposed to be the most powerful man in the world. He's the president of the United States. And the statement this Dr. Fauci makes, which I quite like and actually epitomizes what VUCA is all about, is you don't make the timeline. The virus makes the timeline, which means we all have to sit and wait and see what happens to this virus. Am I right? That for me is what VUCA is all about. And if the mighty USA is also having these issues and is in a state of VUCA, then what about the rest of us in the so-called developing world in places like in Africa and in places like Nigeria? We are probably in a much more difficult position. So the whole thing about marketing in VUCA starts from the external environment, what is going on, and then we start narrowing down to, okay, so what does it mean for us? Next slide, please. So this is a slide which some of you on this platform, my colleague marketing directors, would know that these are the conversations happening in the boardroom or in the meeting rooms of most of our businesses at the moment. I see some faces nodding their heads. Okay, aside from the pandemic, you know, we've seen what is happening to our oil price. We've seen that you know, our exchange rate is changing. Actually, the real issue at the moment is that you can't even get enough forex to conduct your business, which you would ask, what has a marketeer got to do with these issues? But I will come to that. And then we also see an upward trend in inflation. So we've seen things moving up, price of goods moving up above stuff. I see Bumi nodding her head, you know, and we've got to stay close to it. This is really what our bosses want to talk about. And I think it's important that we contextualize it properly. I had to add port condition because, you know, you can do all the creative stuff you want, but if you can't get your raw materials out of the port into your factory or wherever you're doing, you're actually not going to do any marketing at all, okay? So this is really the reality, and most of our businesses are in this environment at the moment. But John, next slide, John did raise a very important word, which I quite liked, because that is the basis of my conversation with everyone today. Next slide, please. Which is, marketing needs to be a lighthouse to guide business. It may sound cliche, but it is the truth. And if you take the analogy of a lighthouse stands at the beach, and in whether you've got troubled waters or calm waters, a lighthouse shines this light for ships to find their way to the port. And that is what we must do as marketeers. We've got to be able to create that light that our consumers and our customers and the people who rely on us to find that light and navigate their way to us. We are in a competitive environment, so the brighter your light shine, the brighter you're going to get your consumers and customers to port. And John did mention, and I will keep quoting him because I like the fact that someone so far away and in a different kind of world seems to be having very similar points of view to what I'm about to say, is that there is opportunity, and there are opportunities. And most companies are benefiting from these opportunities because they are able to navigate through these stormy waters. Next slide. So I think the first thing, I mean, in any organization where you've got marketing has to be the champion of the consumer. And if you're in service, it's the customer. But, you know, so for the rest of my car, I'm going to use consumer because according to Professor Doyin Salami, is whoever pays for your good or service is your consumer. So I'm going to use consumer for most part of the conversation I do. If you look at Nigeria, we have a lot of consumers, 200 million plus consumers. We've got to be able to cater for them, whether or not the world is falling apart or not. That's our job as marketeers. That's our job as marketeers in guiding our businesses to make sure that they arrive safely at the ports of our business. Okay, whether or not you're catering for the top part of the pyramid, you know, or the bottom part of the pyramid. It really doesn't matter. You've got to be able to make sure that you have enough insights and enough knowledge and enough wherewithal to be able to guide businesses to make the decisions to take care of each and every one in the consumer space that you're targeting. And that is the primary mandate. Whether or not there's COVID or no COVID, our job doesn't end because people must eat, people must bath, people must use cards to make purchases. You know, life doesn't come to a standstill simply because we are in a VUCA environment. And I think that is the role of marketeers. Next slide. So I determine that if you look at what's going on in our environment, the VUCA environment as we would term it, consumers are in a difficult space. marketeers are in a difficult space and businesses are in a difficult space. I think the first thing, apart from our mandate of making sure we have the insights to draw on our mixes and what we do and tell the consumer, is to try and do what I term these 6 things, okay? So first, you've got to empathize with the consumer. Is that, look, I hear you, things are tough, you know, if possible, go ahead, do some palliatives, do whatever you need to do to make sure you're empathizing, the way you speak to the consumer, the way you communicate. You must be able to do a little bit of empathizing, because consumers can also be skeptical about the role of brands in their lives when they don't empathize that, hey, what's happening to you? Don't you see what I'm going through? We've got to educate about what is happening right now with COVID, or what is happening right now with this. So we've got to be able to play a role bigger than just we want to sell you our product or want to sell you our service. We've got to be able to encourage them through the phases they're going through. We've got to be able to entertain them, because at the end of the day, brands have a role in making sure that they add value to people's lives. The number 1 currency of all humanity is happiness. So how do we make people happier than they were before? And brands have to find their way. Businesses have to find their way through that. And we must cater for everyone. And more importantly, we must evolve. And I think John mentioned the whole idea of offline to online. There is so much evolution going on. Recently, I had to buy a product, a hand sanitizer, and I looked at the label, and I saw that it came from one of our beverage producing companies, and I go, wow, you've got to evolve in these times. When things are changing, you've got to move with the times. And I think those are the things that we as marketeers have a role to our consumers in making sure that we stay close to them. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of this, but there's some practical things to focus on. This is a chart I found in the WPP, whatever, about in the WPP document about what you do regards communication, how you remain responsible in the short term, you think long term, how you engage different audiences, but more importantly, how you activate your purpose. Because we all operate for businesses that have a purpose. So you've got to be able to make sure you navigate it in the way that you live your purpose, but your way of achieving that purpose is you remain agile. You have to evolve to actually continue to achieve that purpose. So I'm not going to go into it, but I think if you think about communication alone, you have to listen, be transparent. There's a couple of things I mentioned on it, but I'll share this slide later. If anybody's interested, you can look at some of these principles, which I found very useful. But my next slide is probably the crux of what I'm going to talk about today. Next slide. I say be commercially agile and operationally shrewd. Now, I sit in a position where we have to make decisions on what we do with our product line and our ranges and what we do with the front line of our business on a daily basis. And I've got 10 principles I just want to run through very quickly. I hope I don't overdo my time. The first is ensure the science of marketing practice leads. All of us on this call are marketeers, and we know that there are certain things that we must make sure are right. So first of all, when it comes to communication, make sure your creativity is on the spot. Make sure that your mix in terms of what you're doing with your product or your services, with pricing, the things that you know if you move, the mundane stuff, you know if you move will have the impact that you so desire. It is not the fluffy stuff, which sometimes we can get drawn into. And I guess in most businesses, you find marketeers get termed with various names, they like the fluffy stuff. In VUCA times, make sure the science leads. Ensure the business understands that this is the part of the business that is holding our access to our most important stakeholder, consumers, in place. Your strategy is in your product or your service. It is not in any digital strategy or whatever. What you're selling is your strategy. You can have some other supportive strategy, but if it's not talking to what you're selling or what you're trying to sell, then forget it. And I think that's very important. Wield your pricing sword with circumspection, okay? You saw all the things happening in the market that I talked about, oil price, whatever. There is pressure on our bottom lines. There is pressure on our profits. There is pressure on businesses delivering their mantle to their shareholders. So Pricing is a tool that must be wielded, but you've got to use it with circumspection. Don't leave opportunities on the table, but at the same time, don't get greedy. And so marketeers need to understand how to wield that sword very well, else you cut yourself and it will be a deep wound for a long time. I can't believe I'm saying this in the marketing forum, but AMP is great to have, but not a God-given right, okay? It will be cut when things get tough. Let's get used to it. But when things get tough, let's understand what we do for that. If you don't have AMP, it doesn't mean that your business comes to an end. And you've got to make sure that you're investing in your product so that when the AMP is cut, you have enough to hold you through the tough times. Everyone is a frontline person, okay? Don't stay in the comfort in the office and try and, new slides and you've got to understand what is happening on the ground, okay? I think my time is running out. And then you've got to remain operationally shrewd. Use partners, create transparency, use data, etc. Make sure that you are actually on top of your information. You're fishing where the fish. Next slide. So long-term, be guided by your purpose. Always think long-term. Rekindle the basics of our vocation. Eliminate waste and make sure that when you eliminate waste, the benefit of the waste is used to spiral more growth, because that's the only way we're going to win in the long term. Next slide. So I go back to the principle of the lighthouse, just to recap and to close. I like this quote. It says, "I can think of no other edifice constructed by man as altruistic as a lighthouse. They were built to serve." So if marketeers are lighthouses, we were built to serve. We were built to serve our consumers, and we're built to serve our businesses. So we have to do that. Next slide. And so I have a mandate and the challenge for ADVAN, okay? ADVAN was built to serve. ADVAN is supposed to be a lighthouse for marketing all across all of Nigeria. So I like the 4 tenets of ADVAN: visionary, thought leadership. So we must be able to have forums like these where we can have that very high level thought leadership. And I'm grateful to the likes of Bumi and Idiri and the team that have put this together to share this knowledge and to build capacity for all of us to guide us through how we operate in our businesses. I am glad people like are on this forum where we can use data, research, and the right level of insights collected to be able to guide our businesses. And that is very, very, very key in going forward. Next slide. So there will be winners and there will be losers. In VUCA environments, if you don't act fast, remain agile, and be flexible, you will lose. It's as simple as that. And we've seen some of the big organizations globally lose. But for us as marketeers, our job is make sure that our businesses don't lose. So we have to find the opportunity within the difficult moments that we find ourselves. And I think that is the basis of why we are here today. How do we navigate marketing during these VUCA times? And by that, I go to my last slide. Just a summary, just so everybody walks away with a few things. Okay, the whole world is in VUCA, not just Nigeria. We have to navigate our issues. Whether it's port congestion, we must fix them. We must face our realities. We must champion our consumers. We must make sure that we are guided by our business purpose. Commercially agile, I talked about a few things to make us commercially agile, innovate, all of those things. And then there's a role ADVAN plays in our lives, and ADVAN must play that role a lot harder. And to be honest, opportunities do abound. This is Nigeria. We've always survived. We've always been there. We will survive this one too. And with that, I say thank you. And my final slide is have a cup of tea. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Chris. That's quite a very insightful slide and thought. So to all, the slides will be available on the ADVAN website. But Chris, you've really helped, nailed it. One thing you clearly called out here is the fact that there's pressure on the bottom line. But when I also hear you say to a fraternity of marketeers that advertising budget is not God-given, then I think people will want to have a chat with you after this. But very clearly, very insightful thoughts. As marketeers, who always have to remain the lighthouse to help businesses navigate a VUCA period, and the lighthouse to help businesses find opportunities. Opportunities are bound. Some businesses on double digits right within an VUCA environment, while some businesses are trying to survive on a single digit growth. So opportunities are bound, but we'll have to tap into the opportunities while we operate. So with that, we will go straight to our third speaker for the day, who is Emmanuel Ago, the Jotna Marketing Director, which is the Kasara company. So we'll have Emmanuel take us through his thoughts for marketeers operating in such a VUCA environment. You're welcome, Mr. Ma. The floor is yours.
Can you put my slide on?
Yes, we're on it.
Yeah, please go to slide 5. Let me start from there. Push to 5. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Ago. I work for the Lakasara company. Prior to working for Lakasara, I've had an experience working with Diageo, Guinness Nigeria, and then Heineken, Nigerian breweries. I'm here to make presentation on how to conduct marketing in a VUCA environment. I've heard what Chris said and what John said, and I want to also let us know that the VUCA environment is not strictly restricted to the outbreak of the coronavirus or the pandemic. For all of us who are here in Nigeria, you will bear witness with me that we have been in a VUCA situation even long before the breakout of the pandemic. There are so many things happening in this country that has VUCAized us, if there is any word like that. And when you talk about the activities of the insurgents, Boko Haram, herdsmen and farmers clashes, banditry, unprovoked ethnic conflict, leading to unnecessary bloodletting. And then these have also led to suspension of execution of marketing plan on greater part of the country. This northeast and northwest of Nigeria is barely accessible because of this conflict, and that affects marketeers in Nigeria. Where you can create a campaign, is it not in an atmosphere of peace that people will be able to notice or partake in your marketing campaigns? And then we talked about the foreign exchange, spike in the foreign exchange that have made, that have led to depreciation of Naira and makes raw material import and goods very difficult. And all these things has a role that it plays in decreasing the company's bottom line. We haven't also talked about policy somersault by the government of the day. Here in Lagos, we witnessed the policy issues that led to the banning of GoCada, Max.ng, OPay, and their likes. And these guys have business plans, they have marketing plans, they have marketeers in their midst, but overnight, government came up with a policy that saw them out of the market. So issues about policy somersault by government, issues about multiplicities of taxes, license charges, import and trade restrictions, trade and labor union pressures, energy and power issues have caused companies' operational costs to go high and make marketing budget very prone to be the first thing that most organizations do to cut budget. And then we see that with these whole issues in this country, even before the advent of coronavirus, Nigeria has been operating in a very serious VUCA environment. VUCA in the sense that most of these things are even created by Nigerians. And then it makes it difficult for any marketeer to predict with exactitude of what kind of frequent changes you witness in the consumer decision journey when the environment is very unstable. So without taking much of our time, what I really wanted to share with us is, despite all these issues that have been listed, both by John and both by Chris, are there still hope in doing business? Are there still hope for marketeers to conduct their activities in a VUCA environment such as ours? And I tried to outline some few points that I think should be the beacon of light in guiding marketeers in operating in a VUCA environment. Next slide, please. And I'm going to take the headings and run with the headings. I'll leave the rest of the body text. And the first point for me is encourage the right values. If we as marketeers must survive in a VUCA environment, we should start with ourselves. What kind of values do we encourage in our marketing department? As chief marketing officers, as marketing leaders, do we foster the right values in our business? Because the truth is that your team has to be tight for you to even confront the VUCA environment out there. How do we reward ideas? Do we hire agile and creative thinkers? What kind of people do we have in our team? Recruitment is key if we must survive in a VUCA environment by making sure that we get the right set of people in our team. And by promoting the right culture. Sometimes people move, or most of the times people move job because they are not happy with their boss. And sometimes people move because they move with their boss. What kind of culture are we setting up in our department? Are we building a culture that will reflect the kind of impact we want to see in our team? We need to put our house in order first before we can think of fighting the battle out there. If I take the words of Napoleon Bonaparte, he said, God is not with the battalion, but with the finest shot. It is not about having 30, 40, 50 people in the marketing department. 7, 8, 9, 10 people that knows what to do at the right time and at the right moment is enough to do and engage in this battle. So encouraging the right values, starting from how we set up the department, the kind of people we have, the freedom and the culture that we embed in our system will help us navigate the VUCA system. Next slide, please. Next slide. And then my other next slide, which is is about being flexible and collaborative. Most of the times, the issues that we have in our various offices, in our various departments, is because we have failed to remove internal barriers, and we have also failed to build internal bridges. There's always a conflict between marketing and sales. How do we go about fostering collaboration and being flexible? And how do we break down silos? Because if we are to be fit to fight, we need to deal with these hygiene issues right from the department before you even start confronting the environment. So are we fluid? Are we collaborative enough to respond to the forces of change? And how are we being adaptive to be able to separate and design through paradigm shift from market noises. Next slide. Then the third slide for me here is, if we must survive and do our marketing work very well in the VUCA environment, we need to expand our business models. I'm happy Chris said something about 7-Up bottling. I also took note of it. This is a beverage company in the onset of this pandemic, kind of visualize what the impact would be in the economy and move straight into the production of two-shot sanitizer, hand sanitizer, and surface sanitizers. But what is critical here is, if you run with only one business model, you are likely going to be a victim during a VUCA situation, especially if that business model is grossly affected. And then navigating this environment calls for a multiple business model. And we have seen people and organizations do that, like DSTV evolved, Uber has evolved. If we look at the Dangote and the Go-Kada playbooks, you will also see the evolving of many organizations trying to create multiple business models that will ensure that no matter what the environment will portend, they are sure likely going to have a way of escape and a way of building insurance for themselves. And Brazil research also shows that businesses that on the average are 4 times bigger, that have multiple areas of business, are 4 times bigger and are growing 10 times faster than others. So as marketers working in an organization, what are those low-hanging opportunities that we can see through which we can expand our business models so that we make ourselves less open to the issues of VUCA environment. Next slide. Create meaningful disruption. We have seen a lot of disruptions that are created by technology, whether big or small companies. How disruptive can you be? And disruptions that are scalable, disruptions that are original, disruptions that evolve with consumer needs and expectations. In this global pandemic, we have seen brands evolve. We are all using Zoom. And Zoom has created a big disruption. It has disrupted Skype, it has disrupted all the other video conferencing apps. Disruption is very meaningful in a time like this. And as brand managers, as marketing managers, what opportunity are we creating? How disruptive are we? And how do we tap into the existing opportunities that the VUCA environment is offering to be disruptive? The truth is that even in VUCA, brands are growing. The brands that saw the opportunity space in an environment like this are tapping into it to disrupt and to grow. And the power of the consumers will always be more powerful than the brands. Let's get to the next slide. Next slide. Predict consumer behavior. I won't dwell too much on this. Much has been said about John and much has been said about Chris. But the truth is that there are plethora of data that we can use to predict the behaviors of the consumers. And the earlier we understand the consumer decisions journey, the places the consumers, the evolving of their choice, the taste and the medium of communication, the better we'll operate and excel in a VUCA environment. Because foresight in situations like this beats hindsight. Next slide. Next slide. Delist non-performing brands. In a VUCA period like this, it is important that organizations and companies look at their portfolios of brands Which of those portfolios are low margin? Which of those that are energy sapping? Which of those that are not contributing meaningful to the organization's bottom line growth? Delist them. Concentrate your energy on the ones that are doing well. Consolidate and concentrate your marketing efforts on your winning brands and become category kings with those brands. It is a typical war principle. Fight and take over a territory, consolidate your win, then move to another territory to conquer. And concentrate your investment on the ones that give you the best return. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Shape emerging habits with focus innovation. There has been a lot of opportunity, even in VUCA environment, that creates a whole expansive new ideas that people can tap into. Be bold enough to engage in innovations. Look at opportunities that this VUCA environment are throwing at us and be innovative about it. Unilever reported a sales spike in beverages that contains zinc and vitamin C in their Lipton Immune Support Tea. Even in this COVID era, people are seizing an opportunity to create innovation around affordability, around health, around safety, and around hygiene. And then through the use of contactless solutions with strong functional benefits. So VUCA environment can throw up a lot of blue ocean opportunities that you can tap with compelling innovations. Next slide. Next slide. Sustain new habits using contextual cues. We've seen a lot of habits that is coming up in terms of the way people use sanitizers, in terms of the way people, their behaviors are changing. Marketers can help turn behaviors into habits by identifying those contextual cues that drive those behaviors, and then develop product packaging and marketing that reinforces those contextual cues. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Align messages to consumers' mindset. In a moment like this, that the world is going through a gloomy situation, your communication as a marketing professional must be in tune of the mood of the moment. This is not a time for a Mickey Mouse or a Tom and Jerry form of advertising. Your communication must speak with the right tone and chord and touching the mood of the moment, what the consumers are going through. And it is important that we align our messages to consumers' mindset in an environment like this. Next slide. Next slide. Analyze consumer beliefs and behaviors using granular data. Data is important at this time. And I just want to also let us know that time series data that we have over the years may have changed. Relying on 4 or 5 years of data may not be the relevant thing in the scheme of things now. And it's important that as the evolution of habits, consumer behaviors, and occasions are happening in the marketing space, we follow it up with consistent tracking of our data. Gone are the days when you rely on quarterly brand tracking, quarterly brand health, quarterly retail audit. It has to be done on week or bi-monthly so that you'll be able to follow the consumers where they are going. It is important we understand the changes that are happening in the marketplace. And by driving the right insight and getting those insights from data, data and analytics must be at the heart of decision making, and creative solutions inspired by human truth must be developed from it. Next slide. Chris said something here when he said, whether we like it or not, budget must be cut and budget is not given. But what I'm saying here is with the issues on ground and that leads to budget cut, we need to spend smarter. And in spending smarter, there is always an opportunity that you can have to spend your budget rightly. Look at what is happening now in Nigeria with whole inventories, fallow inventories that are bound. Marketers can negotiate a hard-nosed discount with all the partners in a period like this and get great value for their company and for their product. So, and again, marketers should not be in isolation. Marketers should not go on isolation. So what you see in a VUCA environment like this, when budgets are cut, people now say, oh, there's nothing we can do. You can still do a lot if you are creative with the little budget that you have at hand and do something in the marketplace for your brands. Let the voice of your brands be heard. In situations like this.
Hello, Ima, you have just a minute to round up.
People pull back, put their budget back and wait for situations to come back to normal and forget that consumers are not that, consumers come to them in difficult time. They will know the brands that aligns with them, has the potential to rescue any business from crisis. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Ima. Can you please stop sharing the screen? Duchess team, please, can you stop sharing the screen? All right. Thank you, Ima. Quite some good insights from there. Katin, do we have a marketing department that is fit to fight? A marketing department that that is flexible, that is fluid, that is collaborative, especially when it comes to finance department that collaborates very well with the finance, because I know that is a very common thread that runs across all marketing functions. And of course, once as we operate in a VUCA environment, we have to spend smartly. I mean, that is every business see the marketing department as the spending arm of the business. Now, how do we spend smartly and prove to our organizations that our spend is actually contributing to huge returns into the business? And so those are thoughts that that we should have at the back of our mind while we go into the panel discussion. So I think at this moment we'll have to go straight into the panel session, and of course that session will be moderated by Ifeoma Dozie. So Ifeoma, please, would like you to come take over from this moment where we'll go into the panel discussion. Please, for all attendees, put in your questions into the Q&A session, and of course we'll begin to have the conversation, and Ifeoma will drive all the conversation and questions from that point. Ifeoma, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the speakers. I think it's fair to say that there was a degree of consistency across the three speakers in terms of some very powerful marketing principles, which are even more powerful in these volatile times. I think the first question I want to pose, and I'll pose it to Bridget, but I think after Bridget answers, I will give the floor to the other panelists to also share some more insights into the question I want to ask. And it's related to investments. I think it's fair to say, and Emmanuel made this point, that a lot of countries like Nigeria have been going through VUCA for quite some time. However, economists have defined the COVID pandemic as a true black swan. And what we have seen is that even the strongest of brands, and all of us are very familiar with the brand Z rankings globally, We've seen some of the top brands, global brands of the world, reduced investments quite significantly during this period. We also are very well aware, or we should be, about the research that John referenced in terms of the long and the short, the work that has been done by Les Binet and Peter Field, and the importance of finding the right balance between short-term business objectives and long-term brand building. I really like John's reference to 60%, 40%. This is a very important benchmark that I think we all live every day, or we all try and observe every day. So the question is, in these challenging times, how do we balance the long versus the short? How do we manage the pressures, the business pressures to change the dynamic of 60-40 to, in some instances, 100% short, in some instances, 80-20? How do we find the right balance in view of the recessionary business environment that we are facing in Nigeria?
All right, thank you, Ifeoma, and thank you again to all of the speakers. In fact, my notes are full. I really was scribbling away. So thank you very much. To answer your question, I think, well, I really don't like to look at marketing spend as a cost, right? So like we like to say, you know, where I work at Stanbic IBTC, it is really an investment, like you put it. So we really have to constantly put it in the face of, you know, the stakeholders, internal stakeholders, leaders, that the investments that we're making are actually not costs, but, you know, they are actually foundational spend for, you know, a future return on investment. So how do we actually manage that perception at the moment? I think that is in creatively communicating to our leaders about what our long-term objectives are in alignment to the overall business strategy. So what is really at the fore of what we need to do now? And I think this digitization is really taking the lead on that. So if we actually put our long-term spend into digitization to enhance customer experience across all platforms at this time, I think that will be an immediate solution to looking at investment in a different light. And for the short term, I think those can really, you know, follow as we recover from, you know, the pandemic that we've all found ourselves in. If we all agree at this time, customer experience has really been key to a lot of the consumers. They want to do things when they want to do it, and they want to do it seamlessly. So how do we as businesses now enhance our platforms to ensure that those experiences are seamless? I think that's where we really need to pump in a lot of our investments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we move on to the next question, Emmanuel and the rest of the panelists, nice to see so many familiar faces, by the way. Emmanuel and I worked together at Heineken.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Where I spent the majority of my career, FMCG, before I moved to MasterCard, where I am today. So Emmanuel, Chris, John, would you like to add some additional insights into that question before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off here. Look, the first thing to say is if a business hasn't got any cash, there's not a lot you can do, right? There's no amount of advice any of us could give to those businesses today. You know, you have to have something to invest in the first place. But on the assumption that you have and you're just deciding what to do with it, then my advice here is a combination of three things. And it all comes together in something I was talking about earlier, which is the strategic storytelling that you do as the market lead with your leadership group. It starts with evidence, right? What evidence is there that you can put in front of the leadership group that doing the same old thing is going to get a different outcome? right? You can most probably present evidence that shows them that doing the same old thing is not going to work at all. And then on top of that, if you can get some evidence that says by doing things differently, by investing for the long term in combination with the short term, you get a different answer, then hopefully, if they're prepared to listen, then you should get a different reaction. The second thing is around risk mitigation, because if the leadership room are prepared to do something differently, they want to be reassured that what happens if things go wrong? So you want to protect your downside. And you can use things such as the principle of 70-20-10, which is you invest, say if you have $100 to invest, you invest $70 in things that you know are going to work, because you know, for example, TV gives you this reaction, it's fairly predictable. You're going to invest another $20 in something that you've seen somebody else do. Maybe you haven't done it, but you've seen the evidence from their case, and you think, well, I reckon that's going to work for me. A little bit more risky, but you still got some evidence. And then you only invest 10% in stuff that you've got no clue as to whether it's going to work, but it sounds like a great idea. But if you lose, you haven't lost the house. And then the third thing is simply courage. Yeah, has your business got courage? Because if it hasn't, then that's a tough place to be.
Thank you, John. Okay, so
if can I make a quick
yes,
addition to it? I think I'm the bad person on the call today, because I think people are alluding that I said advertising must be cut. I said it's great, but it's not a God-given right. Now, if I worked in the tourism industry or in construction or in automobile, the industries that have gone down at this time, there is no way you're going to get a free handout of advertising. And I use the word carefully, advertising and promotions. Certainly, I didn't say marketing spend, because marketing spend goes, you can use spend to ensure more physical availability on shelf, all of those things. That is great. And in one of my slides, I just say reallocate spend when necessary. I think a lot of marketers feel my job is no longer valid when I don't have money to spend. And that is the notion that we as a group must start changing. That, that's why you invest in brands over time. And the day you don't have money, you've got to be able to still use the equity of these brands to take you further beyond what you have today. So yeah, just a little bit of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
If I might
okay.
say on the long term versus the short term. My name is Agre Maposa. I'm Chief Growth Officer for Kanta across West, East, and Central Africa. I think it's very important for marketers to realize that we have the now, and we have the core mandate we have is the lighthouse, which is what Chris and John alluded to earlier on. As a lighthouse, we guide, but not only do we guide, we bring purpose. We bring purpose into the lives of consumers. So in this time, or in these times of all times, it's very, very important to have very clear purpose that goes beyond just your sales as marketing people. When you have this purpose and you invest in this purpose for the long term, then even when strong winds come and try to push you around like we have now, you are much better than the others. As you have seen, Brand Z results have clearly shown that those brands that have invested over time emerge quicker out of such situations like VUCA. And even right now, those brands that are stronger and stronger equity have performed much, much better than the brands with weaker equity. So for the long term, you still need to balance that. You still need to put that investment in building strong purpose that have strong consumer connections. And then in the short term, as long as people understand who you are, how you deal with the short term, everybody is more understanding, more lenient when you make mistakes, when you don't, when you accelerate and so forth, they can understand. But I just wanted to emphasize on the importance of purpose in brand building. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Agri. My next question is actually for you. So quite a number of the panelists and also yourself in your opening statement mentioned analytics, ROI, evidence-based. You know, and Chris, I really like the phrase that you mentioned, make sure science leads. And it builds on that notion of marketeers being the lighthouse in the organization, providing the thought leadership and ensuring that we are providing those insights. So in specific relation to that question around science, Agri, could you help us shed some more wisdom, some more insights, especially given your field, in terms of how we can equip ourselves to lead with science in a way that provides that lighthouse feature and capability to the rest of the organization?
Thank you very much, Ifeoma. It's very important when we are going through such uncertain times, volatile times, to introspect and self-reflect. And it's only so true that for the many decades, researchers and marketers should have changed. We have known many ways in which we should have changed, but we have just not been quick enough to doing it. And I guess we have been pushed during these times to move quicker. There are several ways in which we should be more agile. You know, we're talking of a volatile environment. Things are happening now and we cannot predict them. So we should be able to have information systems that give you information very, very quickly and that are agile. One thing that I've seen emerging with different information companies, which I think you should make great use of, is self-service platforms, where just like you can order your stuff online, just like you can order on Amazon, you should be able to order your quick feedback studies that give you feedback within a day or within 2 days. This is something that I know is happening. I know Ipsos offering it. I know Cantor is offering it. And I know quite a number of boutique smaller agencies are doing it. So you've got your advert, you want feedback, you want improvement, you should be able to just put in your filling on a form online, and you should be able to get that feedback within a day or two. Such agile methods become very, very important. It's also key that as you're doing all these agile things and getting feedback quickly, you still have your long-term systems that keep you focused on the core purpose of where you are going as a brand. So you shouldn't throw away your strategic tools that help you understand your strength and keep you sincere in your direction. So those long-term equity studies should still be kept. They will not be used for you to make everyday decisions, but they'll help you to stay online and on track as you do all those kinds of maneuverings. Because it's so uncertain, we don't even know where things are happening in the next 2 weeks and 3 weeks. It's important for us to have, as marketers, systems that give us information every day and to make great use of analytics, combining our sales data, our market information data, and all that continuous tracking data that we can get every week or every 3 days from our insights companies, depending on how you get it. Infusing all these so that you can have on a dashboard, which is live and ongoing, information that give you feedback. If it's social media feeds that have got the right kind of analytics that address your key performance indicators, these are the kind of things that you need to be able to change course quickly where you can, whilst you reserve those other longer term strategic tools to guide you in the direction you are taking overall.
Thank you very much for that. Do any of the other panelists want to add or chip in to that before I move on to my next question?
Yeah, I'll offer a slightly counter view, if I may. I still fundamentally believe that marketing is about the balance of art and science. I think certainly science and technology is playing a much more influential role than it has been, and that's a good thing because it's advanced a lot more to address marketers' needs, which is great. But at the end of the day, no matter, data at the end of the day, for example, is just a series of zeros and ones. It's what you do with it that counts. And I think as long as you have that ability to be able to extract insights and use insights as springboards for growth, that's where data's value and science's value plays its role. But to get that springboard for growth, you tend to have to lean into more softer skill sets, such as creativity, problem solving, curiosity, some of the things we were talking about earlier. Now, having said all that, I am a massive, proponent of Ehrenberg Bass and, the Dark Lord of Penetration, as Byron Sharp is fondly known as here in Australia.
Everywhere.
And, all his laws are, empirically proven. In fact, when I was at Kellogg's and the Little Red Book came out in 2010, and I read it, and I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. And I went straight to, to my marketing insights guys, and I said, take our data, check each of these laws out. Are they true? And every single one came back verified. That was a tremendous, confidence boost when it came to science. But ultimately, in order to drive penetration, for example, we had to come up with a better creative-led execution of our brand strategy to engage consumers. So it's both.
I do agree with that, and it's something I'm very passionate about. I think we've gone through different waves in thinking from our marketing principles, and the Byron Sharp thinking definitely changed perspectives and the lens a bit, but I think it enhanced. It doesn't replace. For me, science, data, ROI, effectiveness does not replace the things that you spoke about in terms of creative storytelling, the curiosity, the purposefulness, the long-term thinking, the brand building, the loyalty. Some words may not be right for today's world, but I think at their core, the spirit remains the same. Now, in terms of purpose, which is an interesting one, a lot of you have spoken about empathy, about staying relevant. And I think it's extremely important. You can't be tone deaf in today's world. You have to listen to your end consumer and your customers. And we see a lot of brands taking a stand on social issues. And I use those words very carefully because purpose is not always a social issue. Now, in those brands taking those stands, we see from research that lots of consumers today actually trust brands more than they do governments, and they're looking to brands to play that role. Now, to what extent? Because we've seen brands that have done so successfully, but we've seen those brands that have fallen flat on their face when they try and take a social stand. Pepsi is a classic example of things that went not the right way in terms of the stand that they took some time ago. So how involved should brands be in terms of social issues in light of the fact that in their DNA, some brands are built for it and others are not? I'll open this up, but I see John eager to respond. John,
oh yeah, you've pointed that one right at me. Again, I'm going to offer a slightly counter view, right? And because I know there's a lot been discussed around purpose today, which I quite understand. It all boils down to, how do you drive emotional affinity for your brand, right? And, emotional affinity, as we know, is that, human connection to your brand. And, emotional affinity is far more powerful than some of the rational things the features and bells and whistles that we know about. Now, if at the end of the day, a connection through to a social issue is a way to drive emotional affinity, and that works for you and your brand, in a relevant and authentic way, then good for you. Seize the opportunity. But it's not right for every brand, and I think going back to your example about Pepsi, more recently, of course, in the early stages of COVID, I'm sure we've all seen the YouTube video of the 5-minute COVID ad made up of 30 different brands, same style of music, same, everyone was jumping on the bandwagon. And it quite simply was not distinctive enough by individual brand level. That true emotional affinity, I doubt, was being, driven back to the individual brand. And so it all just became, bland wallpaper. So I think be very, very careful. I mean, obviously, as an ex-Unilever guy and a very, socially and purpose-driven company, they've made a whole corporate strategy out of using purpose to drive brands. And certainly when I was there was a claim to the investor community that 70% of Unilever's growth was driven by purpose-led brands. Now, as a marketer in the organization, I had to bite my tongue slightly because 100% of the marketing spend went behind those brands and nothing went on non-purpose brands. There's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I think we just have to steer clear of the Kool-Aid a little bit and stay true to the fundamentals of marketing. If it drives distinctiveness, if it drives emotional affinity, then it's right for you. But if it doesn't, leave the Kool-Aid.
Thanks, John. Chris, I see you smiling.
Yeah, this is thanks, John. I do agree with you to an extent, because brands are like people. Okay, so know thyself. I cannot have been talking about certain things all my life, and then one day there's a big social issue, and then all of a sudden I think I can have a conversation with the world on that social issue, forgetting all the things that I had done, and I expect the audience to take it in or soak it in hook, line, and sinker. I think know thyself, and brands have personality. If it's not in your personality, stay far away from it. And I think that's where I am. And then secondly, brands are built to deliver value to business, not to just become voices for social causes for the sake of it. Let's be very clear about that. So if the social cause you're chasing or challenging is going in dissonance with your business purpose, then you're actually going to cause more confusion than bring in harmony between yourself and that cause. So I go back to my first point: know thyself, which is what your DNA is all about, and then stick to it. And this is not a conversation only for marketing folks. This is a business conversation that needs to be had, because you can do all the right marketing, but you're probably doing something in your supply chain which affects what that social cause you're doing. So yeah, that would be my point of view. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys. I definitely agree with John and Chris. Analogy I really like to use oftentimes when I talk to my colleagues who really throw all sorts of things at us in marketing. Are you not going to stand up for this? Are you not going to do that? Is you must really know where you're from. You must really know who your parents are. And back to what Chris says, know thyself. Because if you don't know yourself, you're going to be confused and be, drawn in various directions. So what purpose really? So not to rehash what John and Chris has said, I'm totally aligned, especially to the last point, what Chris said about know thyself and really stand for what your purpose actually has set driving and you're delivering to. So I wanted to just add that. Thank you.
And then for me, again, it's important that if you want to get involved in social issues as a brand, despite the fact that whether it is your purpose or your DNA, the way you also go about it matters a lot. in terms of driving through authenticity, showing that you really care for the people or for the issues or the social issues that you're chasing, and not just making it look like you are driving it for a commercial value. Because when consumers start seeing that you are not authentic, even in your social costs, then it has tendency to boomerang. So one has to be honest, one has to be authentic, one has to show empathy, show that you really care for the consumers, even in the course of those social issues, and not just doing it for trying to exploit the people or exploit the situation that you are supposed to salvage. That's what I have to put on this.
Super. Thanks so much. This is definitely a conversation that I think we could spend hours on, but we have to manage timelines, and we've received quite a number of questions from the people who are listening on. So there are a few questions around effectiveness. Specifically, how can we become more effective to measure the direct impact on business performances? And a specific one on ROI, how can we demonstrate ROI via the online channels? So, Agre, maybe I'll start with you to help us. Again, you shed some light on that earlier, on that question. But in terms of, how can we equip marketeers to become more effective in measuring the direct impact on business performance? Agre, I'll start with you before I hand over to the rest.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ifeoma. We need to look at the holistic picture of a consumer and markets so that we can be able to better understand how these are interacting and affecting our brands. And as we look at markets and consumers, we also need to understand that the consumer is existing on different planes. The consumer is on the online digital platform, and they are also offline doing a lot of their other work, and they're also shopping. So what's important is to come up with measures that can integrate these different worlds of consumers, because these different worlds of consumers are in fact all intertwined to be one. There is a big risk that with the development of digital platforms and solutions and a lot of activity regarding e-commerce and also regarding communication and engagement online, there has been a tendency to look at to use certain heuristics that are not directly aligned to how we build brands or how brands are built in the minds of consumers, like over-dwelling on likes, on size, and on all those other measures that come out online. What's important is to integrate digital measures with the consumer measures that we've always had, whether these are coming from studies or other platforms. Technology has indeed helped us to be able to use passive measures. For instance, if you're using eye tracking, or if you're using facial expressions, or if for all the different digital ads that are being shown, so you can be able to tell, for instance, how people feel or engage with this. We should be able to combine these technical advancements that are to our benefit with the softer, insightful or in-depth measures that we've always used in understanding consumers. And then have a good understanding of how these intertwine and how these actually lead to the eventual activity of purchase and also likely repeat purchase, which is like longer term brand building.
Thank you.
I would support what Agri is saying there. I think every business is different. I think, and if you, so basically identify the lead indicators that are directly related to your business performance, right? If you can't hardwire the business outcome you're looking for directly to the media spend in whichever channel, online or wherever, and some businesses can, if you're in e-com or whatever, you can do that. But if you can't, then at least then identify the lead indicators that lead to business outcome. And in my world, that was very simply unprompted awareness as a measure of saliency, penetration, and also what we called physical availability, which is the distribution, were you present in store. If your marketing spend leads to healthier outcomes on those lead indicators, then there's a direct correlation to business performance, and hence the ROI. And then it's simply a case of it's not that simple, but you then just have to test, learn, modify, test, learn, modify, test, learn, modify, get to that right combination, and find that ultimate mix. The only alternative I found to that involves lots of money, going to companies like Kantar and spending a fortune on marketing mix modelers and things like that, which not everyone, can do nor needs to do, to be honest.
Yeah. Thank you. Before we move on, I think we have a few comments from our hosts, so I'll just pass over back to them to say a few words before we proceed. Obum.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ifeoma. Quite a good and insightful session the panel session has really been. So at this moment, we'll just give a minute to Duchess. Duchess is our host partner, our digital partner in ADVAN. Just a minute for him to share some of his thoughts, and then we can go back to the question and A and round up. All right, Duchess team.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, it's really great being in your presence. I see a whole lot of people, and it's really insightful. And you guys have really touched every aspect of marketing, especially with regards to this time that we know that things are changing and we just have to change. So I don't have much to say, but it's just to let the house know that, while in the process of adapting to the new normal, we are your partner to work with you all through, right from the point of executing your advertising programs. And Duchess integrates your data, technology, and creativity to help you reach your target audience and also to reach your marketing goals. This includes banner advertising, rich media, native advertising, and then we have an intellectual property around direct to mobile. We have access to over 85% of the mobile phones in Nigeria, and we have integrated with other platforms and to enable us to reach about 95% of people on the internet, and we have over 5 billion reach monthly, and over 50 exchanges are connected to Duchess. And we give our partners two models of self-serve and also managed service. But whichever one is suitable for you, we're able to deliver. And the key thing is to achieve your goals. And we have very strong targeting options, which helps to save your budget. Instead of pushing your budget to everyone, it targets and narrows down to your target audience. We also have access to DMPs. And Mr. John talked about the death of cookies, and we have a solution that also, where you don't have cookies, it brings in technologies that is able to help you achieve your targeting, including retargeting and segments. And we have partnered with a huge number of programmatic platforms and suppliers to ensure that you have the widest reach across the internet and apps. And you can always reach us, you can always visit us www.duchess.com, and you can also send us an email on the email info@duchess.com. We've worked with a number of brands, especially in this room. We're also working with a number of partners, including advertising agencies in Nigeria, and we want to walk you all through and help in any aspect we can. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dorchester. So if we take just 2 questions from the Q&A. We are far past our time. We'll spend 25 minutes more to the time allotted.
Yes. So I did take one beforehand, which was indeed linked to measurements and
for this session. So if we can take.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, super. So we did take that one question on measurement and ROI, which is it's an interesting one. So I think if you have the money to invest, you can do market mix modeling. Kantar, Ipsos can enable you to have the right kind of data. Online is very critical because you have the ability to be nimble, you can test, you can modify, you can repeat the process over in a quick turnaround time, as John said. So that was one question from the audience. The second question that I've seen is with regard to data again, and whether or not we should have a dedicated person in-house that's analyzing the data. I think some institutions have this, that's their research department, or consumer insights department, but open it up to the floor. I think the question was specifically to Chris, whether organizations should have a dedicated in-house analyst that's focusing on providing the right kind of information as opposed to everyone chasing numbers. So Chris, should we start with you?
If I may just repeat, it went a little bit, I didn't hear the last bit. My system went off for a few seconds.
Sure. So the question is if institutions, organizations should have a dedicated in-house data analyst that's providing the right kind of information on an ongoing basis, because everyone is busy chasing numbers these days.
No, absolutely. And this is where my point about let the science lead, because you've got to have data which you can translate into observation and then into insights for decision making to happen effectively. Okay. Now, the data is not only limited to consumer data, which you get from the likes of Kantar or Ipsos or whoever you're getting it from. You've got to have different levels of it. A lot of us work for organizations that have got tons of internal data, okay, from sales data in terms of where is the sales going? I mean, how much time are we spending interrogating this sort of data, okay? I also subscribe to the Byron Sharp movement. So physical availability, penetration is the ultimate goal. So mental availability, physical, you can't have good mental availability if your physical ability is crap. So how much time are we spending interrogating this data? And I think those are some of the things we need to have more deliberate in-house approaches to how we get to it. That's the first thing. Then you've got your external data, and I'm glad to work with partners like Agri and Kantar and all of those guys to bring in an external perspective. I call them, whilst your internal data is your front-facing headlights, you've got to check what's happening behind your back. That's the backlight for for you to see who's close by, okay? And that's where external data provides you that information. But in driving a car, we all know we need to have good glasses and good vision. And that comes down to how much time we as marketeers are spending on the front line. Okay, I know because I was there. That helps you to test your hypothesis on all the information that the data has. So yes, it's good to have someone in-house who pull this data into something meaningful for actions to be taken, but that somebody like me or you or any of our colleagues on the front needs to take that action. And that comes down to our own intuition as well as our own knowledge of what is going on. That helps us take these actions in a speedy manner for the benefit of our organization.
Fantastic. Thank you.
If I may add to what Chris said on this whole issue of data, first and foremost, I think it is nice because I have an in-house data scientist. So we have data scientists in-house who looked at all the data, internal data, and at the same time, the collaboration that we have with our external agency, Kantar, Millward Brown, and all the other agencies that track data for us. But then there's one important thing that I want to highlight here. How much of the time as marketeers do we dedicate to trade visit, where we leave the comfort of our office and we go out there on trade to see for ourselves what is going on? Most of the successes that I've had in my marketing profession is the ability to go out there in trade, see for yourself what is going on, and then get an insight of what is happening around your brand. That even before the quarterly data or the bi-monthly data will hit your decks from the external data agencies, you already have an idea of what is happening to your brand. And then the data that you're getting from the agency or the data that you're getting from the data scientists in-house will just be to validate what you have already seen in trade. Because most of these data come retrospective. When you get quarterly data 3 months after, then what would you have done if you are not having a real-time, online real-time information of what is happening to your brand? Then you now see that you're only going to make use of those data for the next coming 3 months. The other 3 months that the data was gotten from the agency is already gone. So it is important that as we rely heavily on internal data and again on external data from our data partners, that we go out there in trade and see for ourselves what is happening. How much of the time did we spend with our salesmen to get the real insight of what is happening to our brands? Because you will know. You will know when your brand is failing the moment you get into the field. So it's not only internal or external data. We have the duty to be out there in the field to see for ourselves what is going on.
Yeah, very, very valid point. And I think, you know, it's a continuum. You start with data, and then of course you get insights, and then those insights become foresights, and then what I like to call, you know, informed intuition. But ultimately, ideas can come from anywhere. And to quote what John said earlier, it's those great ideas that really drive growth. Like I said before, we can carry on, but we have to stop. And I think I have to hand back over to the hosts because we've run out of time a bit. But thank you to all the panelists, everyone who has participated with all the questions. It's been extremely insightful conversation, and I look forward to more of these sessions in the future. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ifoma. Thank you for helping us coordinate and moderate the session. So quick one, Duchess, please, can we just take 2 comment or speak from the attendees just so we round up? I'm looking at, we go for a hard close by exactly 5 minutes past 1. We should have round up completely. Duchess team, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Okay, so can we just take 2 people from the attendees, please?
Okay, we have a number of people in the waiting room. If you have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll enable you to speak. Okay, we have Christopher. Christopher, you can ask your question. Christopher Warhearing. Hello, Christopher, are you there? Christopher, can we hear you? Okay, and while Chris is waiting, we have Philip Chilaka. And Philip, you can speak now. Hello, Philip.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. You can ask your questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank our senior colleagues for the workshop. I would say it's a real workshop because we've been able to benefit a lot from the insights that came through. My question is around at what point do you consider shift from traditional advertising, a large shift from traditional advertising to digital advertising in a VUCA environment, considering the fact that most of the countries, okay, especially like Nigeria, who are still more traditional media led. At what point in time do you make that conscious choice to invest a lot more of your investment into digital advertising versus traditional advertising?
I can take that one if you like. So I think the answer to that question, it relates to understanding where your audience is right now. So if as a result of, changes in audience consumption of media due to the pandemic, more people spending time at home, for example, perhaps watching more TV, more streaming, whatever, or indeed more radio, who knows, whatever the right answer is for you. That really should guide your thinking around optimizing your media mix. And I would encourage everyone to stop thinking around whether it's traditional versus digital, because everything is digital these days. TV, as I was mentioning before, through connected TV, smart TV, is digitized. Outdoor is increasingly becoming digitized. Radio is digitized. So it goes, but still with the fundamentals. How is your target market consuming media, and therefore how do you reach them?
Great.
Yeah, I would also say that you need to have a really good balance of the different platforms. And what John just said is very key, because you have to have a mindset of the multiple channels that are available around the consumer and not digital versus traditional. What we've certainly seen in empirical studies that we've been doing ever since before the COVID problem became a problem in Nigeria and throughout, we have seen clearly that there are increases in digital use of platforms such as Facebook, such as WhatsApp, your house parties, and TikTok, and all that. That's over 70% in general. But we have also seen that television has had a very constant state throughout. So TV remains important, because remember that for some households, they still find it difficult to afford that data that can sustain them being entertained for hours. And you see that TV has had that constant prominence over time. But what's key is that digital platforms have introduced new occasions for communication and media consumptions, such that you have different digital channels playing throughout the day, and yet you are seeing television being more prominent around prime time when people are actually having dinner or around there. So it's about coming up with very simple model, not complex marketing mix models in quotes, but very simple models that allow you to understand that you should be putting 20% of your budget, 30%, 40%, and for such sustained times for you to actually have impact. So these are very simple things that really do not need complex scientists, that you can actually get done.
And Philip, if I may add to what Agri said, I don't think it is a one-size-fits-all. For me, it's about understanding your audience and where they are. And even when you want to move from traditional to the digital space, within the digital space, you need to also understand what platforms within the digital space that appeal to your target profile. It is not every of your target audience that are on Facebook, on Instagram, on WhatsApp, on TikTok, on Google+. You need to have a good audience profile understanding of your brands and where these guys live. if we take, for instance, during the lockdown in Nigeria here, you see that the television becomes very premium for people in the sense that everybody is at home. So your television, your mobile is the only easy access for you to get information. But then people still move around skeletally, and then the out of home still subsist. So it's understanding your audience, understanding your target profile and how they consume your media. And then you will be able to have a balanced view of what will appeal to them. It's good to maintain a digital presence. It's also good to have a traditional presence, depending on what works for you.
Yeah, if I could add to that very quickly, I think, you know, what's important, one key lesson from this pandemic is the ability to evolve and the ability to change and respond to new behaviors. During the COVID pandemic, we at MasterCard, you know, we pivoted and we reallocated most of our spend to digital. And of course, you know, the spend was reduced for obvious reasons, but we focused primarily on digital. Now we are reevaluating other channels and making choices accordingly. So I think that's key, and it's not about getting, you know, a copious amounts of data to back up where the audience is. It's really about being nimble and making those choices, whether it's traditional or digital, about where your audience is, and more importantly, having the right content for the right audience in the right channel. So I think that's super critical as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you all for the builds and inputs. We've had very insightful conversations. I mean, I'm scribbling out here and my notes are almost filled, but we'll have to have a hard call at this moment, a hard close. We'll continue the conversations on our social media channel. Like I indicated earlier, the slides are very much available for anybody that wants to access them. So at this point, I will call Mr. Gerard, just give a closing remark, and just so we can close out exactly at 10 minutes past 1. Hi, Gerard. Okay. So
Gerald's mic is off. Gerald's mic is off.
Okay, Ediri, please, can you help us with the closing remarks, just so we can
I'm back.
Oh, good.
You hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Gerard. Yeah.
Yeah, I said thanks, Obum. It has been quite an interesting and exciting session. We have learned that we need to be nimble, we need to look at the times, and we need to determine what works for our consumers in each of the scenarios or situations. It has been quite interesting, and I just want to thank all our keynote speakers. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Wolf-Caesar, Marketing Director of Friesland Campina Wamco Nigeria PLC. I'd also like to thank John Broom, quite insightful at what has been happening in Australia. He is the CEO of the Association of Australian National Advertisers, AANA. I'd also like to thank Emmanuel Agu. I think we were together at one other session a while back. He's the Group Marketing Director for Dotner. Of course, the whole session was ably moderated by Ify Dozier. So thank you, Ify, for that wonderful session. She's the Director, Marketing and Communication, Sub-Saharan Africa, MasterCard. And then we also had two panelists who joined the panel session. We have Agri Mapusa, Chief Growth Officer for Kanta, West East and Central Africa. And then we have the first and foremost, she is the Vice President of ADVAN, in the person of Mrs. Bridget Oyefeso Odusomi, Head Marketing and Communications, Stanbic IBTC Holdings, PLC. Before we thank, well, I'll thank the partners, but there were some other notable personalities that came into this webinar. First and foremost, I would like to recognize the Acting Registrar of APCON, Mrs. Ijedi Yoha. Thank you, Ma, for finding time out of your busy schedule to come for this webinar. I would also like to recognize the presence of Mr. Tony Agamume, the president of NIMN, that's the Nigerian Institute of Marketing. I'd also like to recognize an ADVAN trustee in the person of Mr. Lankwe Omoyele, who is also the MD Nitro 121. Also to recognize Ikwo Uko, MD Ethod Marketing, and also a former ADVAN Vice President. Thank you all for coming. Mrs. Hannah Oyebanjo, MD Redwood Consulting, and also a former ADVAN ESCO, you are not left out. We recognize you and we thank you for always supporting us. Thank you for always being there whenever we're having anything. Our partner associations, we have Mr. Femi Adelusi representing MIPAN, he's the president of MIPAN. And we also have Mr. Emmanuel Adufu, president of OAN. But this session could not have happened without our host. So we really, from ADVAN, we really want to say big thank you to the CEO of British ADX, in the person of Mr. Chibuke Good News. Thank you all, thank you all, thank you all. This was a wonderful session. And as Obama has said, we can continue the discussions on our social media pages, handles. Thank you.
Thank you all. So,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And please,
Thank you.
make the most of what's left of today. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris. Well done, everyone.
Thank you, ADVAN.
Thanks, Bumi.
Thanks, everyone. Nice seeing everyone.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you, Duchess. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, ADVAN.
Bye. Let's keep in touch.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Yes.